I want to welcome you to another episode of the Ordinary Idiot Podcast. I'm your host, David Morillo, and here is the funny thing. I thought I had already recorded the last episode of the year. But as the saying goes, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. And so over the last 72 hours, I've had what seemed like a series of random conversations with some brothers. And each time the Exodus story came up. And now what's beautiful about that and complex about that is that it at first seemed like a coincidence, and I kinda brushed it off that way, but it didn't take me long to realize that these weren't random moments at all because I had been thinking about Exodus, for some time now, and I was thinking about it as it relates to my own story. And this is when I realized that these were love notes from my dad, AKA God. If you've spent enough time with me, you know that that means God. And what struck me is how the Exodus narrative, this ancient story of liberation and promise, has served as some kind of decoder ring for me over the last few days. It's brought clarity to how I view 2024 and reshaped the way that I hope to step into 2025. And as I sat with it, I felt the nudge: don't wait. Don't push this until tomorrow. Share it now. So here it is. And here's the content. My prayer is that the time that you spend listening to this episode will feel like an investment, one that pays dividends in some type of insight or encouragement, or maybe just a fresh perspective. Whatever today happens to be for you, whenever you're watching this or listening to this, thank you for tuning in and walking this journey with me. Now, today, we're diving into the story that spans centuries. It's a narrative that intertwines our dad's unshakable promises, humanity's struggles, and the faith it takes to step into the unknown, which has really been the marker of my 2024. Now, we'll trace the arc of our dad's covenant with Abraham, the journey of Israel through Egypt and the wilderness, and the ultimate fulfillment of our dad's promises. And as we do, I'll pause to reflect on how this ancient story isn't just history. It's my story and it's our story. And so I think that as we spend time together, you'll see that it kind of speaks to the fears that hold us back, the doubts that cloud our faith, and the pull of the familiar, even when it no longer serves us. So, in order to get jumping on this, let's start where it all begins with the promise. And so in Genesis 12 and later in Genesis 17, we see that our dad calls Abraham out of his homeland with a promise. He says in Genesis 12:2 and 3, he says, I will make you into a great nation and I will bless you. I will make your name great and you will be a blessing. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. Our dad invites Abraham into the unknown with this incredible promise: a land of abundance, a multitude of descendants, and a role in his redemptive plan for the world. But the first thing, the the first thing that our dad says is Abraham must leave. He says in Genesis 12:1, get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house. Now, I don't know if you read it like this, but I need you to understand that this wasn't a simple relocation. Abraham left behind a civilized city where he lived for 75 years, embarking on what some scholars would indicate is an 800-mile journey into the unknown. This call was intensely personal, and Abraham couldn't outsource his faith, or he couldn't rely on familial support systems. Our dad was asking him to abandon all certainties, economic, social, and relational, to trust in him, and he would lead him all the way. I get this. I get this. I get this. This has been so close to my 2024. I'm not Abraham. You're not Abraham, but the story resonates. It hits differently today. And so, Abraham leaving his familiar for the unknown, recognizing that it's not easy, he leaves his country, stepping into a world that is entirely foreign to him. There are new languages, there's unfamiliar foods, there's strange customs, and there is a ton of gods that he didn't recognize. And just again, historical context, I'm trying to do this quickly, so please bear with me. Abraham comes from a worldview and where there are a lot of gods that they're serving. He gets called by the one true God. And then he's invited to step into the unknown where he's going to encounter a bunch of other gods. Now, this wasn't just a casual move, it was a radical shift that ended everything about his life. And I think that it's comfortable for us when we read the text that we picture Abraham as some rugged nomad wandering the deserts, but that that's that's not how his story began. He was a city dweller. He was rooted in the comfort and rhythms of an urban life in Ur, one of the great cities of the ancient world. And let's not forget, Abraham wasn't some young buck. He was 75 years old, a seasoned man, deeply established in his ways when our dad called him to pack up and head out. I don't know about you, but that's a big ask. And it wasn't just relocation, it was a monumental step of faith into the unknown. Our dad's call to Abraham was striking in ambiguity. When you read Genesis 12:1, I get Romans 12 on my brain. Genesis 12:1, go to the land I will show you. Do you notice the lack of detail? There's literally no GPS pin, no itinerary, and no mapped out plan. Our dad simply promises, I'll show you. And that's often how our dad works, isn't it? He rarely hands us a full picture. And instead, he asks us for trust, promising to guide us one step at a time. This is the essence of faith, following a voice that leads, even when we can't see where it's taking us. What our dad does give Abraham is a string of I will statements, five of them to be exact. In Genesis 12, through 3, while our dad doesn't explicitly say, I'll go with you, he repeated I will declarations that carry weight of his promise. I am with you, Abraham. I am not sending you out alone. The echoes throughout scripture resonates with our dad's timeless assurance. In Hebrews 13:5, he says, I will never leave you nor forsake you. That promise becomes an anchor in both joy and sorrow. And I can tell you that in 2024, I have had both of those. And like Abraham's journey, my journey has been far from perfect. There were times when he wandered off course, but our dad's faithfulness never wavered. Even when Abraham might have felt like our dad had stepped away, the truth was quite the opposite. Our dad never took his eyes off of his servant. Now, his presence I'm sorry, I sometimes get emotional thinking about this because 'cause I'm overlaying my story on this story, and it's like I said, this is all fresh to me, and so, uh, as I think about it, his presence was constant. It was steady and unshakable. It was a thread that was, like, running through Abraham's long life of faith. Now, this is the beauty of walking with our dad. It's not about having every step mapped out. It's about trusting the one who walks with us, knowing he won't let go no matter what. And guess what? The story tells us, dun dun dun, spoiler alert, Abraham obeyed. Abraham obeyed. But again, the journey wasn't straightforward as it is in our life, it is in his life. It took over 600 years for Abraham's call to Moses leading the Israelites out of Egypt. That's a long time to wait for a promise. And in the waiting, we see humanity's tendency to doubt, take control, and even settle for less than our dad's best. Now, let's fast forward to the story of Joseph. I'm trying to get through a lot of content here, and please forgive me because I'm kind of going in and out of ADHD moments. I'm trying my best. Um, Now, Joseph's rise to power in Egypt becomes a saving grace for Jacob's family during the famine. But what starts as a rescue quickly morphs into captivity. Over 430 years, the Israelites multiply, growing from a family into a nation. Yet with that growth comes bondage. And by the time that Moses enters the story, the people of Israel are crying out, desperate for deliverance. Now, here's where it truly gets fascinating. When our dad rescues them through Moses, their greatest challenge isn't escaping Pharaoh's grip, it's learning to let go of Egypt. Now, let me say that one more time. I am persuaded. This is, again, my observations and going through the text. Please don't scold me theologically. I am just sharing with you my own observations and overlaying my story on it. Maybe it resonates with you or not. But when our dad rescues them through Moses, the greatest challenge isn't just escaping Pharaoh's grip, it's learning to let go of Egypt. Now, I want you to think about this because I think there's a way I can justify my statement here. Now, Egypt was their place of oppression, but it was also a source of food, water, and predictability. Once in the wilderness, they began to crave the comforts of Egypt, conveniently kind of forgetting about the cruelty of their environment. In Numbers 11:5, there's a funny statement. It says, "We remember the fish that we ate in Egypt at no cost. Also, the cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, and garlic." This isn't just a historical anecdote. It's a classic case of what I believe psychologists call the Stockholm syndrome, but on a national scale. Now, the Israelites were drawn to the dysfunction of their past because the freedom our dad offered felt uncertain and required trust, something that they struggled to muster. And I think for context, for those of you that don't know, because I was talking to my friend about this, and the term the Stockholm syndrome, it originated in 1973 during a bank robbery in Stockholm, Sweden. And over 6 days, hostages developed emotional bonds with their captors, even defending them after their release. Now, it's a paradoxical survival mechanism. People form attachment to what oppresses them, finding comfort in familiar, even if it's harmful. And I don't know about you, but the Israelites displayed this same distorted attachment. And despite the harsh realities of their enslavement, they romanticized Egypt. They fixated on its food and structure and completely glossed over the daily grind of forced labor and opposition. Now, um, can we consider some examples here so that again I'm not a complete heretic? They have selective memory, and again, Numbers 11:5, they lament the loss of Egypt's free food. Their complaints highlight how easy it is to remember fleeting comforts while ignoring systematic suffering. They have a crazy fear of uncertainty. And in Exodus 16:3, it says that they grumble about their freedom in the wilderness, saying, "If only we had died in the Lord's hand in Egypt," or by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There, we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted. They were so accustomed to Pharaoh's dictating their lives that the unpredictability of our dad's provision felt destabilizing. They misplaced their trust. Over time, they began to equate Egypt's rigid system with security, and they forgot that their ultimate power provider was not Pharaoh. It was always our dad. I am sharing all of this stuff because there are parallels in our own lives that are striking. How often do we cling to the dysfunctions of the familiar? Jobs that sap our energy, relationships that confine us, mindsets that limit us because they feel safe, even when they're harmful. And again, I'm not trying to highlight things in your world. I'm sharing journal notes from mine, and forgive me if it feels familiar, but I'm not sorry because maybe just maybe God is speaking. Because like the Israelites, we're often reluctant to leave our Egypts, even when our dad is calling us to freedom. And in a weird way, I just this became super fresh for me in 2024. I don't wanna leave it on this kind of, like, weird note, though, so let me just, do here a little bit of a sidetrack, side mission, ADHD off ramp. I wanna share with you a spoiler alert. I'm not supposed to talk about this till later, but I will. I it in the form of an invitation. It's a spoiler alert in the form of an invitation. Now here's the invitation. The invitation is to trust our dad's promises even when the path ahead feels uncertain. Miracles like manna in the wilderness or the parting of the Red Sea aren't just historical events. They're reminders of what our dad does when we let go of what enslaves us and step into his provision. Freedom, I have found this year in more ways than one, isn't found in returning to our old ways. It's found in trusting the one who leads us forward. I am literally coming to learn this more and more. I've not arrived, but I'm coming to learn it more and more. Now, I'm going to take us to another ADHD off ramp because I'm here and I just feel the thing kind of like stirring. And so, can I just share another observation? And I know that this is going to kind of feel repetitive because of what I just said, but just bear with me. The wilderness wasn't just a physical journey, I believe. I believe that it was a spiritual one. And our dad used the 40 years to teach the Israelites to trust him, but many struggled to let go of their slave mentality. And like I mentioned earlier in Exodus 16 and 17, we see their grumbling over food and water, their doubts about our dad's presence, and their outright rebellion in worshiping a golden calf. Now, the wilderness exposed their fears and their weaknesses, but it was also where our dad revealed his faithfulness. And I can speak to that myself this year. But if we're sticking with the story here, he provided manna daily for them, teaching them to rely on him. He gave water from a rock, showing his power to sustain. And he renewed his covenant at Sinai, reminding them of their identity as his people. And so the wilderness is often where we meet our dad most intimately. It's where he shapes us, even if it's painful. And this is another lesson I've come to become intimately familiar with in 2024. Okay, back to the core of what I'm attempting to share here. And thank you again for continuing to ride with me on this whole thing. But as we move forward in the story from Moses, we see that finally we move into Joshua's narrative. Sorry, I'm leaving Moses going into Joshua. The Israelites finally cross into the promised land. Now, the fulfillment of our dad's promise to Abraham took centuries, but it's also reflected as worth the wait. In Joshua 1:9, it encapsulates the courage required to step into the unknown. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord our God will be with you wherever you go. The journey from Egypt to Canaan wasn't about geography. It was about transformation, as every beautiful story is. It's about transformation. And the land of promise was always tied to the promise of our dad's presence and his abundant provision. Now, most people skip Joshua 1:6, where he says, be strong and courageous because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their ancestors to give them. Our dad is good at cashing his check. So, what we started with Abraham, worked our way through Moses, the desert, and over to Joshua. I just kind of want to leave you with these points that I hope would summarize this in a way that would add value to you. We as people tend to romanticize the past. Like the Israelites, we often misremember the past. We glorify what's safe and familiar while forgetting its limitation. Let's not let nostalgia keep us from walking into our dad's future. I'm coming to learn that freedom also requires trust. Our dad's invitation to freedom often feels scary. And the Israelites had to trust our dad for food and water and protection. We too must trust him, even when his timeline and his methods are unclear. I'm also learning a masterclass that the wilderness is a gift. It's in hard places that our dad refines us. If you feel like you're in the wilderness, ask yourself, what is our dad teaching me here? And what is he inviting me to? Just two questions that I have used throughout this year quite a bit. And lastly, I think that this is one of the most profound and beautiful lessons that has been made fresh to me this year. Jesus is the greatest Exodus. The story of Exodus foreshadows the freedom that we find in Jesus. Through his death and resurrection, he leads us out of the bondage of sin into abundant life. And through the Holy Spirit, we experience his presence every single day. Now, as I wrap up here, please let me leave you with this thought. The same God who called Abraham into a land of abundance is calling you into a life of freedom and flourishing today. He's calling me into a land of freedom and flourishing today. But stepping into that life requires trust. It means loosening your grip on the familiar even when it feels safe. It means believing that our dad who makes promises is faithful to keep them even when his timing feels slow and the path is hard. Jesus says in John 10:10, I've come that they may have life and have it to the full. This isn't just a nice idea. It's an invitation. Are you willing to trust him enough to follow him into the unknown? And it requires us leaving behind what's comfortable for what's better. Now, here's the thing. Here's the thing. Abraham wasn't just blessed for his own sake. Our dad's promises wasn't just about the land or family. It was about purpose. You will be a blessing, and all the families on the earth will be blessed through you. That's what Genesis 12 says. I remember this old message from a brother named Matt Hurd, in which I think he titled it Plumbing Theology. And as far as I can remember, the point of the message, which is applicable here, is that our dad's design for his blessings is like a flowing pipe, not a stagnant bucket. We're meant to be conduits, not containers, pipes, and not buckets. Now, what does that look like? It means that every blessing that we receive from our dad, whether material, spiritual, or relational, is meant to flow outward. If our dad has entrusted you with a resource, share them. In 2025, if he's giving you insight into his word, teach it. If he's poured joy into your life, spread it through a kind word or simple smile. Even the youngest among us and those who feel the least equipped can pass on the love and kindness that you've received. A boy with a sandwich at a prayer meeting gave it to Jesus, and our dad fed over 5,000 people with that. Now, this is the beauty of our dad's economy. Very few blessings are meant to stop with us. They're meant to move through us, blessing the world around us. The question is, will you open your hands, trust his promises, and let his blessings flow through your life to others? That's the kind of abundant life that I think Jesus came after. That's the kind of life I think Jesus came to offer. A life fully alive, fully free, and fully poured out for his glory and the good of others. I just want to thank you for the disruptive way that this message has come across, because I've been kind of like looking all different places. I'm trying to be more disciplined with this art and this gift that he's entrusted to me, sharing these podcasts. And so if you know me and you know me well enough, you know I'll go on these tangents like I'm doing right now, over explaining what I'm thinking because of the ADHD. So with that being said, I just want to leave you with this expression of gratitude. Thank you for joining me today. My prayer is that the story inspires you to trust our dad's promises and step into the abundant life he has for you. I'd like to close out in prayer and, leave you to 2025 and pray that it just really blesses you as you navigate whatever he's inviting you to. Dad, I thank you for the opportunity of recording this tonight. I'm sorry for the weird flow of it, but I just pray that it would make sense in the hearts and the ears, in the spirits and souls of those that are listening. As we enter into 2025, Lord, I pray that you would help us to step into purpose and the calling, the scary things that you're inviting us to, trusting that you are faithful, trusting that you are going to do what you said you would do, and that you are everything and more that we have read about you. I pray that you would bless every listener who has been afraid to step out this year into what you're calling them to. I pray that they would take incremental steps in trusting, or that they would just leap out and trust you because you're a good Father. So I just pray a blessing on them, a blessing on their families, a blessing on their finances, their health, their relationships. Bless them, Dad. In your son's precious name I pray. Amen. Thank you for hanging out. And until 2025, which is a day from now, may you walk courageously into the unknown. Um, our dad is going with you. So that's all I got. Thank you for stepping into this moment with me.